Yeah, no, I'm just trying to work out.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to NABMA's annual conference, Maximising Your Market Assets. I hope those of you who were with us last night had a very enjoyable evening and that you did not stay up too late. Although I know from talking with delegates this morning, some of you enjoyed the conviviality of the hotel and some of the local hostelries in the town. But I'm sure you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for a day of excellent presentations embracing our conference theme. Just a few housekeeping announcements, if I can please, before I ask our President to issue a formal welcome. First of all, the hotel changed over officially to Crowne Plaza today. So if you're going to use the internet Wi-Fi facilities, you need to log in to Crowne Plaza as opposed to Holiday Inn. There are on the table some details about how this can be done, but you are now looking for Crowne Plaza. There is a fire alarm. Monday is the test day for the hotel fire alarm system. It is scheduled for 1:15, so that is an excellent incentive for us to finish on time at 1:15 for our lunch break. But there is no need to take any action. When the fire alarm bell goes, it is simply a test, scheduled for 1:15. Can I mention the arrangements for tonight's dinner? The drinks reception tonight is in the atrium of the restaurant where you had breakfast this morning. That takes place at 7:30 p.m. and the dinner, which follows the drinks reception, is in the conference room commencing at 8 p.m. I mentioned last night the entry forms for the marketplace competition. I know some of you have been busy visiting the exhibitors this morning. Please do take part in the competition. There is a weekend away at the Holiday Inn Crowne Plaza Hotel and £100 spending money, all to encourage you to engage with our excellent exhibitors and sponsors. I hope those of you who were here last night really enjoyed the Shakespeare experience. As a continuation of that, we've received from the Town Council and the District Council some celebratory Shakespearean mugs, which are at the back of the room on a table displayed at the back of the conference area. Please take one as a souvenir of your visit to Stratford-upon-Avon, and hopefully a happy remembrance of our visit and conference. Finally, can I just encourage you to ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or are on silent. We don't want sort of speakers or the flow of the conference interrupted by the noise of mobile phones. So if I can encourage you in that direction. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd now like to invite our new NABMA President, Chris Roslin-Joseph from Sheffield, just to give a word of welcome to our conference. Chris.
Thank you, Graham, and good morning, conference. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you to Stratford-upon-Avon and this NABMA Conference, which is our largest conference ever. And I have to say, Mick, I think that's down to me being president. So, no disrespect. No. I think this is going to be a very successful conference, given the size of it and given its location. And just to start off the flow of the Shakespearean theme, Shakespeare walks into a pub, the landlord says, "You're barred." We have a wide selection of presentations which I'm sure you'll find helpful, and encourage many delegates to support the speakers throughout the conference. This is particularly the case on Tuesday, when we often see numbers of delegates dropping because they wish to make a speedy getaway. But please stay towards the end of the conference. The speakers have gone to a lot of trouble to prepare the presentations, and we'd like to have a good audience for them right up to the Tuesday lunchtime. I would particularly like to thank Groupe Giraud for their sponsorship of the conference, which makes such a tremendous difference in our ability to deliver such an event of this size. I also want to thank all the marketplace exhibitors and sponsors. The work that they put in and the work that they do makes this conference so successful and makes NABMA such the organisation that it is. Please, during the breaks, visit them, get your cards stamped, and talk to the exhibitors. They're absolutely wonderful people, and they don't bite. Well, some of them do, but most of them don't. You will find your competition form in your conference bag. One of the presentations today is by one of the Sheffield market traders, Beer Central. I'm particularly looking forward to that, as I've known Sean since he opened his stall on Sheffield Market, and unfortunately I am a regular visitor to his stall, so you'll find out why when you see the presentation. I'm looking forward to meeting many of you over the next few days, so if I haven't said hello, come and talk to me. I am approachable, even though I am about 6'7" and built like a brick outhouse. So please have a good conference. The presentations, please applaud them, and any other events that will be sampling and given the opportunity to sample, but mostly network, talk to each other, and have a great conference. Thank you.
I cannot think of anyone better to open our conference than Simon Quinn. Simon is a great friend of NABMA, particularly via the association with the Institute of Place Management. Simon has spoken at conferences before, and it has always been a great delight for him to be with us, and he's provided some thought-provoking issues and information. And in terms of our theme of maximising your market asset, it's a great delight for me to invite Simon to open our conference with our first presentation. Simon.
Good morning, everyone. Graham, thank you very much for that. It is a great pleasure to be back with you again. I guess one or two of you might be thinking, didn't we see him last year in Harrogate, or maybe on the diploma in Derby? And you're right, you did, but I promise you that I've got some new things to say to you. It's not going to be a repeat of that. I've got new things to say because it's not only a pleasure, but it's an honour to be asked to actually open your conference and to be able to explore some ideas about how you might maximise your market asset. Now, you may wonder why I would have thoughts on that. Well, in part it's through research we've been doing with the Institute. In part it's through work that I've been able to do with markets during my time with the Association of Town Centre Management, or now Association of Town City Management. But in part it's also because of my own experience. And I guess I have to confess that I came late to markets. I didn't actually start working on a market stall until I was 17. Some of you, I suspect, started a good deal earlier if you were doing that. But at 17, I sold fruit and veg on Saturdays, in school holidays, during college vacations for about 4 or 5 years. And it was a tremendous experience to see how a market operated and to see really how hard it is to actually be someone working on a market, setting stalls up, putting fruit and veg out at 5:30 in the morning. But it taught me quite a lot about what markets are doing. I confess I then widened my interest more into towns and cities as time went on. But I got an opportunity when I worked as town centre manager in Romford to reacquaint myself with markets and to spend time there looking at the future of a fantastic market that at the time was celebrating its 750th anniversary. And it's perhaps here in Stratford that we might be tempted to think nostalgically, to think back to the history of markets, to really think about them as things that date, in many instances, from medieval times, things that are perhaps unchanging, things that will perhaps survive all that is thrown at them. But I think that would be a mistake. I think that would be potentially not thinking of the market as an asset, but the market becoming a liability. Because we have seen over the years that markets have failed. We have seen markets struggle. Some of you may be experiencing that now. We have seen successes, and I want today to try and tease out why some markets are successful. I also want to explore the context of what is happening to markets now and give you an idea of the challenges that lie ahead and some of the responses that you might make. And those responses are based partially on experience and partially on research. I'm trying to give you some food for thought. You may not agree with everything I'm going to say to you. You may indeed vehemently disagree with some points. But that's okay, because this conference is going to try and explore those issues in more detail. So, let's start with what is a market. And those of you who know your law, or those of you indeed who sat through Graham's part of the law presentation on the diploma will know it's a concourse of buyers and sellers. And of course it is. And that concourse might be wholesale, it might be livestock, but for most of you, I think, it's retail. And when we think of a market as a retail location, then I think it's important to think about what is happening to retail. And one thing we know about retail, both from what planning policy statements from government say, but also from what literature says and research says, is that retail is dynamic. These words go together all the time. And I suppose it's when you stop and you say it, retail is dynamic. Retail is a dynamic industry. But what does dynamic mean? Well, the definition that I could find that seems best is it's characterised by constant change, activity, or progress. Would you say your market is characterised by constant change, activity, or progress? I have a feeling that progress means going forward rather than just changing. But that's an important part. So let's spend a few minutes looking at retail and the context of retail. Retail has always changed, and I guess markets themselves have done so as an epitome of that. In the Middle Ages, I'm sure there was change. In the Victorian era, we saw great market halls being built. But in the last 50 years, a lot has happened to retail way beyond the market industry that has affected markets. We saw the advent of refrigeration, a tremendous step forward that helped commercially. Many businesses were able to change the way they operate, but most importantly, shoppers were able to change their behaviour. And whether it was freezers or refrigerators, they changed their shopping habits. Secondly, we saw the growth in car ownership, a trebling in car ownership, a trebling in the miles travelled over the last 40 years. And we saw from that consequences that followed. People were not just getting that bus into the market town that they'd always previously relied upon. They were able to have a choice of where they went to shop. At the same time, as you know, we saw the growth of supermarkets. And from small beginnings, companies like Tesco rapidly developed until they became category killers. And that had a huge impact on retail and on markets. And fourthly, we saw out-of-town shopping. People got in their cars and chose to go outside. And that had a very dramatic impact upon town and city centres. And a great deal of time was spent in looking at the impact. We saw the development of the concept of town centre management, city centre management. We saw changes to planning policy. And all of these had an impact in helping to lessen the effect of out-of-town shopping, but not stopping it. And even in the last 10, 11 years, we have seen a loss of 50 million square feet of retail floor space in town centres, and a similar amount developed out of town. But these were major changes that came along and impacted on retail. And there is another one, online shopping. And hopefully what you can see from this is that there's been a very rapid rise in online shopping in the UK. Overall, since the recession really passed over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen retail expenditure growing about 1.5% to 2% a year across all categories, all channels. But it is here that the actual rise is really happening. Double-digit increases year to year. From, in the UK, about 9.7% of retail expenditure in 2010 to 16.8% this year, and a forecast of 21.5% for 2018. online shopping is steadily eating into retail expenditure. It's not doing it evenly across all categories. Indeed, in grocery, it still is only about 6% of grocery expenditure happens online. But that's doubled in the past 4 years. But it's having a significant impact. And actually, in some ways, we should be proud of this, because we are the world's best online shoppers. See here at the bottom, 16.8% compared to other leading economies. No one else spends the same proportion online as we do in this country. In part, that's because we're a nation with credit cards. We're a fairly small nation. We've had retailers who've embraced online retailing, and we have great logistical companies. So all the ingredients were there, despite the hiccups we perhaps faced in the early days. All the ingredients were there to give a great experience through online retailing. So this has meant a challenge. We have seen a rise in retail vacancy, and we are expected to see further increases in retail vacancy. But it's not going to be uniform. What has actually been happening is money has been coming out of town centres to go elsewhere. If you went back to the 1970s, about 95% of retail expenditure happened in town centres. So it's not surprising markets were having a good time at that stage, because that's where people went to spend their money. By 2000, this had fallen to just under 50%. And as I said, despite the restrictions on out-of-town development, it has continued to fall. 2014 thought to be about 40%, and recent research from the Centre of Retail Research said that the percentage of income spent in stores fell about 2.5% last year, and is expected to fall about 3.5% this year. So we expect, when we see new data for this, to see yet a further decline in the amount of money being spent in town centres. As I said, it's leading to increases in retail vacancy, but that increase is not uniform across the country. Not all centres are suffering the same. So if you're based in London and the South East, you are not going to see the same level of retail vacancy as if you're in Wales or the North West. So where you are in the country is going to have a big impact upon the health of your market before you do anything else, because there are different scenarios at play. But as well as geographic reasons, we've also found from research that certain kinds of centre are suffering more. And indeed, it seems to be those towns with a catchment area of between 100,000 and 300,000 that are suffering the most. The big cities are doing very well. They're reinventing themselves. They're responding well to this change in retail. And they offer many other activities and functions apart from just retail. And therefore, I think, on the whole, they're maintaining footfall and activities. Likewise, small towns are doing so. On the whole, they're surviving better than these places that previously were filled with multiple retailers. And one of the reasons for this is a lot of the pressure from online retailing is affecting the multiple retailer. Research by BNP Paribas said that previously, if you were a multiple retailer, you needed about 250 stores across the UK to achieve national coverage. Now they reckon you need about 80. And I've just seen some research by someone else suggesting that may fall to 50. Because you can use these stores either as click and collect places or in order to deliver from as people switch to online. So what that means is, for lots of towns that previously had quite a large number of multiple retailers, they're going to go. So this may have an impact upon your market. But there's something else I think you need to think about when we think about the place your market is in. And this is research we've done over the last few years with the Institute of Place Management, and looking at data that's been supplied by Springboard, who, as you may know, count footfall. Because we kind of imagined that footfall in nearly all towns followed a similar pattern, because we'd never really looked at it before. And this top left-hand pattern showing change in footfall over the period of a year is what I think most people thought town centres were like. Going around the country, speaking to local authorities, speaking to town centre managers, they all say to me, Christmas is the time we take most of our money. Christmas is our real period of activity. And retailers will tell you likewise. But what we found from looking at how town centres are actually used is that that is true in the big comparison centres. People will travel large distances to go to a comparison centre in the run into Christmas. But coming down one step to a speciality town, particularly thinking of cathedral cities, cities with historic interest, we see that actually their footfall starts to rise much, much earlier in the year. And they have people coming in consistently over the summer, but they still have a Christmas trading peak, just perhaps not as great as the comparison town. They still have an offer that is attracting people at all those times. Number 3, the convenience community town is, I think we find from our research, so we're looking a bit further at more data now. This was drawn on basically 65 town centres. We're now looking at over 200 of them. But most towns have a fairly level footfall during the course of the year. There is no real increase in the pre-Christmas period in the number of people coming into town. Yes, they may spend a bit more when they're there or in the supermarkets and things, but it's not changing footfall overall. They're fairly level. And then we also found another type, which is the holiday town, where, not surprisingly, the peak is over the summer, with a very small Christmas increase. So, what type of town is your market in? When are most people coming in? When do you start seeing different people come into your centre? Or, if it's a convenience and community town, are those people primarily drawn from your local catchment? People you can get to know over time. So thinking about the kind of centre you are, and thinking about what is happening to retail, is my starting point for really thinking about how you maximise the market asset. So let's look at the response. And to help us do that, I want to go to some other part of the research we did, but some of you will have seen before, which was really to say, what factors impact the vitality and viability of a town centre? And we found from reading the literature and from working with 10 towns around the UK that actually there's 201 factors that have an impact on the health of your town centre. 201. And from looking at that, there was no real order to those 201. And therefore we did some work with experts, both academic and practitioner, and said to them, if you were asked to look at each of these factors, can you tell us to what extent you believe the factor is important for vitality and viability on a scale going from 1 to 5? And can you also tell us how much local control you think can be exercised over those factors? So I mentioned earlier, I showed you that graph showing where retail vacancy was going to happen, much more in Wales than it was in London. And you see down in the bottom right-hand corner here, we have location. Where you are in the country has a big impact over vitality and viability, but you'll see it's at the bottom because you do not have control over that. So we wanted to look in a bit more detail about which of these factors should be a priority for local partnerships, for local authorities to do something about. And we said all these in this bottom corner you can forget. These you just have to live with and accept. These really aren't worth the time and effort, but it's these that you should be getting on with. And we identified in that top right-hand corner 25 significant factors that we believe make a difference to the health of a town centre, and if you have a healthy town centre, you're much more likely to have a healthy market. So, we haven't got time to go through all 25, you'll be pleased to hear, but I did want to look at the top 5, because I think in these top 5, there are things that will guide the actions that I believe you should be taking to maximise your market asset. And these are the top 5. So let's have a look at these. And let's start with leadership. What do we mean by leadership? Well, if we're thinking about a market, if we're thinking about a town centre, I think we're thinking of a vision and a strategy, but it's something that needs to be mission-driven. This is an American expression which came from a market in North Carolina that was actually looking at its future, a market that was failing, and it felt that what it lacked was mission-driven leadership. And it was introduced by some means I'll talk about in a moment, seemed to make a dramatic impact upon that market. So let's think about how you end up with a mission-driven focus for markets, and a couple of examples. Start with Barcelona. Anyone who's been to Barcelona and seen its markets will know it's doing a fantastic job in ensuring that its markets remain at the heart of its communities and that they're relevant to the people who live in the city. Barcelona has 43 markets, permanent markets, scattered around the city, and this plan by the city architect was basically saying the market will be at the heart of each of our communities. They estimate their communities to be about 25,000 people, and each group of 25,000 will be served by a market. And together with the market, there are other community facilities, libraries, post offices, that kind of thing. But it's at the core of a community. Now, Barcelona looked at its markets and said, some of them are not doing very well. They're not responding to change. If we want them to be relevant, we have to invest in them. And invest they did. Between 2011 and 2015, Barcelona as a city has spent 133 million euros in revamping 25 of its markets. And this isn't putting up some new signs and painting a few things. This is a radical overhaul. The market on the left, all of the market traders have been moved out for 2 years into temporary accommodation only a few hundred metres away in order to completely refurbish this wonderful historic market. The market on the right, you may not even know that's a market. Underneath the market halls, they're excavating to put market trader parking, a limited amount of car parking, refrigeration and other things to bring the market into the 21st century. This is a huge commitment by the city that is underway, and it's paying dividends. We're seeing revamped market halls that are serving their community, and they're going beyond just the refurbishment. They're putting in place effective local management. All the managers are trained, all the traders are trained, local delivery services, all kinds of things are going on around markets in Barcelona. And they have made the commitment to spend from that public purse to lead to refurbish their markets. And I know one or two examples in this country where there's market hall refurbishment. Scarborough we heard from last year. But on the whole, I want to say to you, if your local authority doesn't have the budget to invest in its market, you may have to think about taking it outside of the local authority. And we have seen examples of that. This is in Berlin. This is Markthal 9 in Kreuzberg. This was another, as you can see, historic market hall, fallen into severe under-occupancy, run by the city, not performing. City was thinking of selling it off for non-market uses, but a local group came together, a local group with a clear mission, a clear vision to refurbish the market, to get it occupied again. Now, you might think, that's going to be like Borough Market. It's going to be a place that is surrounded by affluent consumers, and therefore, naturally, it would work there. But actually, Berlin is the only capital city in the European Union that is poorer than the country as a whole. The Kreuzberg area of Berlin is actually poorer than the city as a whole. And the Germans have a remarkable statistic that actually they spend less on food per head than any other European nation. So it's not a natural thing to put food halls in the middle of Kreuzberg. But they've worked hard at getting in local businesses to work in these markets, to bring in representatives of the community to do activities here. It isn't fully occupied all week as yet, but they are doing things like street food Thursdays and a Thursday evening. This is on a Saturday lunchtime. Lots of activity going on. But what's essential to this is they have a very focused group driving this forward, who negotiated with the city to acquire the rights to operate the market. When initially the city was reluctant and wanted lots of money, in the end they accepted that the community engagement was more important, and this was going to drive things forward. And it happens in this country as well, in Altrincham, which I'm sure many of you heard about. I mean, Nick and Jenny Thompson took on Altrincham Market Hall, and I quite like this idea that it was just a traditional market hall, but now it's become a place that people go to as a destination. And not only is the market hall itself refurbished, but it's built out outside. When you go to Altrincham, you see a very visible impact in the surrounding streets, with restaurants opening, with new food shops opening, that are trading off the back of the presence of the market. But again, the Thompsons are totally driven by mission. So, my question on leadership is, do you have it? Is it possible to generate it in your local authority? There may be a willingness, but it may actually not be something that's fundable. So how is that going to happen? So leadership is crucial. But then the second of these things is retailers. We need to think about the retail mix. What we've found from the research we've done is that as you saw, retail is changing, but all kinds of things are coming forward. A market needs to offer value. It's not about cheapness, it's about value. And that is how we're seeing the rise of the discount retailers, all kinds of people shopping in Aldi and Lidl because they see it as value, not necessarily being cheap. Markets can do likewise. Think about the diversity of offer, both across the market on any given day and across the different days of the week. Think about balance and do what the Thompsons did in Altrincham. Create demand. They have people pitching in order to take a market stall or to put something on, because they've artificially initially created demand. Now, fortunately, it's working. You need to be thinking about where are your retailers. Are they farmers who could come in? Restaurants, obviously teen markets, established traders, pop-up outlets, etc. But things like commodity restrictions and other aspects that have perhaps in the past limited the activities that markets can do need to be looked at and in many ways thrown out. Not to disadvantage existing traders, but to compete with them. You all know retail is about competition. Is your market a place where competition happens? I mentioned restaurants because we're seeing examples in a number of markets around the world, and particularly in the States at the moment, not just food courts with operators coming in who are national, but local independents being encouraged to open food outlets, and indeed existing restaurants in the town to have pop-ups in those food courts or food halls for a while in order to offer a taster menu or a different experience, putting great food into markets that are perhaps more affordable prices, though in many American food halls you'll still pay $15, $20 in the market for a plate of food. So that kind of competition is perhaps changing who comes into some of these traditional markets. And then there's experience, my third of my 5 things. What is the experience of your market like? Well, on the left-hand side here is Reading Market, tucked away behind a 1960s shopping centre on the way to the Civic Hall in a very poorly maintained area. On the right is Congleton Market. We worked on the High Street project with Congleton, taken off the High Street, tucked away behind this time, I think, a 1970s development. These are not great experiences. Ballymena is another town that we worked with in the High Street project. Ballymena's town charter says it will hold a Saturday market. And on their website, the Ballymena Borough Council website, as was before it became Mid and East Antrim, it says we have a Saturday market. It's basically a car boot sale in a car park tucked away behind some of the existing retail offer. These are not great experiences. Can you bring your market back to where it should be? Can you put it back on your high street? Can you put it back, in Reading's case, into the butter market, into places where people would feel that the market is something special? You may not be able to do that full time. In Ballymena, we're looking at whether we can bring the market back into the town centre in an evening, maybe even on Saturday evenings initially, just to have something different. So the experience, I think, is part of what you have to offer. And you can think of further elements, not just where your market is located, but what's the atmosphere like? Research by people looking at what makes a retail destination attractive found that one of the top 3 factors was atmosphere. And atmosphere was the only one of the top 3 over which local control could be exercised. The others, accessibility and location. But what's the atmosphere on your market like? Does it feel a pleasant place that you want to spend a longer period of time? Does it, at its core, seem neat and tidy and clean? Or is there a little bit of something clutter that makes the market interesting and exciting? Look at the market with fresh eyes. Talk to the people who are using it to see what the atmosphere is like. But markets are much, much more than that. You are not a multiple retailer. And what we found is that customer relationships are key. You probably know this, but you need to remind yourself to make it work even better. Because all of the research looking at the future of retailing is saying that, again, a thing that distinguishes one retailer from another, a thing that makes going to a real retailer different from shopping online, is going to be that customer relationship. And can your traders, can you establish good links to your customers? And are you offering variety? That's not just the same stalls on a Wednesday every single Wednesday. But it might be that different things come up at different days. But this, you probably can't quite see. This is Shrewsbury Market with some real live alpacas there, not llamas. They look And they weren't for sale, they were selling the products from them. But add new things in, interests that brings people in. I see Romford Market is doing pop-up session for a period starting later this month. So that's the kind of thing, new bits that come in that will add that variety. And then we come to opening hours. Opening hours are seen as very important in our research and by our experts. And markets have to adapt. Markets have to respond to this. But I would say here, don't just change your opening hours for the sake of it. First of all, understand your town centre. Have a look at the footfall. See who's coming in. Now, arguably, you can say, well, of course no one's coming in because none of the shops are open. The market's not open. And that is true, but that then means to change that, you need to coordinate things, to have quite a number of people opening. But a market can open. And we have examples of this: evening markets, night markets, Christmas markets, obviously extending opening hours. But it's not just going into the evening. It can be Sundays, it can be doing extra days. And this is Toulouse with its night and evening markets. Started in one place, very, very successful, now spread to a number of markets around the city of Toulouse. And as you see, they have become attractions in themselves. And so we're seeing other businesses opening on the back of the market. Initially, people were not in the centre of Toulouse or in these areas when the market started. They've driven the footfall to come in. So I want you to think about opening hours in order to maximise the asset. And then we come to management. Management is different to leadership. Management is a lot of what has to happen on the ground to make the whole thing effective. You have to know where you're going, but you also have to, if you like, keep things moving. And this is about proactive management. It's about using data and information to make management decisions. But it's also about collaborative management. You are not making those decisions alone, or you and the local authority are not making those decisions alone. Your market has to relate to the wider town centre. You have to involve the wider partnership. You have to involve the other businesses, the community groups who exist in your town centre. And that way you make your market owned by a wider body of people, and your market something that they feel they want to be involved in. And this expression, designed with customers in mind, is emerging out of the literature now of saying this is the future of retail. If you design it with customers in mind, they will come. We published a report last year on multifunctional centres, and we basically concluded that this is what we have to do: less hierarchical and myopic management, and more place-based, porous, to allow intelligence and input from the location. It has to respond to the place that it's in. And you have to be a manager who's informed and who's aware to make those decisions. And so, thinking about how we've got a way of maximising the asset, just before I tell you how you might be more informed, I think you've got to say disruptive change is happening. It is going to continue to happen. We may think we've seen it all yet with the rise of online shopping, but we've got the Internet of Things fast developing. Soon it will be your fridge that's doing the ordering of its food for you. You won't be involved. So where does your fridge decide to shop? Virtual reality coming into retailing, robots increasingly in the retail production side. They will be going into shops and supermarkets soon. Driverless vehicles may change the whole car parking discussion in the next few years, as we don't own cars, but we just use cars. And then artificial intelligence. Who knows where that will take retailing, and who knows where that will take town centres. So disruptive change is happening and will continue to do so. I want you to always think, when you're thinking of your market, that it's a retail operation, first and foremost. And that means you need to be dynamic. You need to be dynamic in your response and in what you're seeking to do. But you have to understand the context of where your market is. You have to put more effort into keeping on top of how your market is changing and what is going on. And I'd like to encourage you to look at those 25 factors on our website and say, not just those 5 I've talked about, but how do the others relate to your market? If I had another 2.5 hours, I could tell you, but I'm not going to do that. So all in all, what you're trying to offer to maximise your market asset is a better collective experience. If your market is part of that community, if your market is part of the business community, if your market is seen as a place people want to be, they will come back and they will spend money. And over the next 2 years, we have just started work with a number of partners, including NABMA and the NMTF, and these 7 towns here, I think 5 of which have markets, to look at how towns can make better decisions and how we can enhance the customer experience. So in future years, you'll hear a lot more about that. But if you wanted more information now, those of you I know have done the diploma, not just this year, but in previous years, or if you haven't even done that, but you would still like to know more about how to be an effective manager, I'm just going to flag up here that we are starting our postgraduate certificate diploma and MSc in Place Management and Leadership on the 5th of October, and there is still time to register. It's a part-time course. It relates very definitely to the work that you're doing in your day job. And I believe there's a great challenge. I do believe markets have a future, but I believe you as market managers need to play a key role in ensuring that all of these factors are taken into account and you understand your market. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. As always, giving us lots to think about, lots of ideas. Simon will be around for the rest of the conference and will be happy to talk to you about the issues he's highlighted, or indeed the opportunities of engaging with the Institute to further your studies and qualities of experience for managing your market. We now move on to the results of the Retail Market Survey for 2016. One of the great events of the last couple of years has been the collaboration between NABMA and NMTF on the Mission for Market project, which took prime place in our programme in 2015. And we've continued that partnership working and collaboration through in 2016. Having heard the presentation from Simon, we can now put in context the health and well-being of our market industry in 2016, as I invite Colin and Chris to present to us the results of the 2016 survey. Thank you.
Good morning, delegates. My name is Chris Savage. I'm Project Manager at the NMCF, and this is Colin Wolstenholme, Market Manager at Bradford Council. As Graham has already mentioned, NABMA and NMCF have been continued to work together on the Mission for Markets campaign throughout 2016. And I think many of you are aware there are 3 work streams in this campaign. Firstly, to assess the health of the sector. Secondly, to share best practice. And thirdly, to lobby government for positive change for retail markets. Colin has led on the operator survey on behalf of NABMA, and I've led on the trader survey on behalf of the NMCF. So before we go on to share the results, I'll just give you some background to the response rate. So like last year, the survey was cut up into 2 versions, short and long, effectively a basic response and a more comprehensive response. Data collection took place between May and July this year, and the response rates are there behind us. It's actually the biggest survey of its kind nationally for retail markets in the UK. We incentivise the response through a free NMCF membership for traders and free NABMA consultancy for operators. So I'll just hand over to Colin now for the results of the operator survey.
Thanks, Chris, for the introduction, and over the next few minutes I'm going to run through the findings from this year's market operator survey before handing back to Chris to go through the market trader survey. I've got the task of trying to make some of this data interesting, so I'm going to apologise in advance. Many of you will be aware that NABMA have undertaken the annual survey since 2011, and the purpose of the survey was to provide a picture of the national market sector and to identify any trends or changes. The survey compared year-on-year performance against 9 core performance indicators. They were the number of store lettings, the number of traders, the number of market days, footfall, store income, operational or management staff employed, the market's profit and loss, trader sales in the turnover and market investment. And market operators were asked to assess each of those 9 performance indicators against 3 possible answers, whether it had increased from the previous year, stayed the same, or decreased. This year we've added a couple of new indicators, and these were occupancy levels and basic rent information. So a total of 310 markets responded. If you think there's an estimated 1,227 markets across the country, then we've achieved an impressive response rate of just over 25%. And the map shows the reach that we've covered all parts of the UK. These retail markets were made up of 87% operated by local authority markets, 5% were operated by private markets, and the remainder comprised of trader, cooperatives, social enterprises and community interest companies. The survey included 84 indoor markets, 142 outdoor markets, 47 street markets, 22 outdoor covered markets, and 15 markets that were a combination of indoor, park covered, outdoor. And the total number of stalls that were included in the survey was 19,820. So some key headline figures from the survey is that £51.6 million has been invested in improving retail markets. 38 million was from capital funding, with the rest from revenue and other funding streams. So combined with the turnover from the wholesale markets, the market sector overall has a turnover of £5.95 billion per year. Whilst footfall has fallen since 2012, it is estimated that markets attract an estimated 26 billion shopping visits. 39 markets in this survey recorded 95 million shopping visits per year. 53% of markets are saying that their performance is similar to last year. This compares with 52% the previous year. They're the positives. However, there are some negatives from the survey. 30% of markets are reporting a fall in overall performance. That's an increase of 2% from last year. And only 17% of markets are reporting an increase in performance, and that's a fall of 3% from last year's survey. So you can see that the majority of markets sort of reached a plateau, but there has been an increase in those markets that are reporting a fall in performance. So we've looked at each of the 9 performance measures, and you can see that there is a differing level of performance against each one. Areas such as footfall and trader sales turnover are the worst performing. There's a downward trend for other indicators, with only market investment showing an increase. So expanding on that previous slide, I then looked at the 9 performance indicators since 2011, and this shows an overall trend with 7 of the 9 performance indicators showing a decline. This decline has not impacted on the number of market days, but has resulted in an increase in investment, which I presume is due to the market operators looking to try to improve or hold their decline in performance. So, looking at market finances, we can see on that top left of the screen that a fifth of operators haven't reviewed their rents in the last 5 years, recognising, I guess, that the challenging times. Over 50% of market operators have reviewed their rents or daily, weekly tolls or licence fees last year, and the results of those reviews show that half of those operators agreed either no change to the rental tolls, although 9% of operators actually reduced their rents, and a quarter of market operators have reduced their licence fees last year. Generally, stall income is based on a fixed charge, and this is probably due to the number of outdoor markets in the survey. The financial position of markets shows that 45% of market operators are operating in markets at a trading surplus, although 47% of markets are either operating at break-even or a deficit. 8% of markets didn't know their financial position. So in terms of a national occupancy rate in markets, the survey shows that a typical average occupancy rate is 77%. I then looked at whether that changed, whether it be an indoor market or an outdoor market. And if you look at the slide, the occupancy rate improves for indoor markets, which shows around about 86%. However, an outdoor market, the occupancy